On a brisk evening in October, Jack Saunders was tracing the outskirts of New York City, his drone hovering above the dense foliage, searching for remnants of a reported meteor shower. The crisp air buzzed with the hum of the drone's propellers, punctuated by the occasional chirp of a late bird. Jack's focus was interrupted by a sharp signal on his monitor. A heat signature, distinct and unmistakable, not like a meteor at all. Jack steered the drone downwards, the camera feed flickering with images of twisted metal and scorched earth before it settled on an unexpected sight. A figure distinctly humanoid, stumbling through the wreckage. He squinted at his screen, baffled. "No way, that's a meteor," he muttered, grabbing his jacket and heading toward the site. As Jack approached, the setting sun cast long shadows over the scene, revealing a young woman with luminous skin and bright, searching eyes. Her clothing was strange, almost shimmering under the twilight, and in her hand, she clutched a device emitting a soft, pulsating light. "Hey, are you okay?" Jack called out tentatively, his hand raised in peace as he closed the distance. The woman turned abruptly, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. "Please, you must help me," she spoke, her voice layered with a strange accent, the words distorted by a failing translator device. Jack slowed, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I'm Jack. I'm not going to hurt you, but you've got to tell me, what happened here?" The device in her hand flickered, and she tapped it anxiously, her lips moving in silent urgency before the translator crackled to life again. "My name is Arya. I am not from your world. I crashed. I am being pursued." Jack looked around the deserted area, the reality of her statement sinking in. "Pursued? By who?" "Enemies dangerous," Arya said, struggling with the translator. "They want this." She held up the device, which now glowed steadily. "Okay, Arya, let's get you somewhere safe first." "We can figure this out," Jack suggested, his investigator instincts kicking in. He glanced back towards his truck, calculating the best route to avoid prying eyes. As they walked, Arya's gaze lingered on the earthly surroundings, a mix of wonder and anxiety on her face. "Why do you help me?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. Jack shrugged, half smiling. "Let's just say I'm not one to ignore someone in need, no matter where they're from. Besides, I have a hunch you've got a story to tell that I want to hear." Arya nodded, her expression softening. "Many do not listen. They do not believe." "Well, I'm not many," Jack responded, guiding her to the safety of his truck. As they drove away, the night fully settled around them, the stars overhead twinkling like distant eyes, watchful and bright. "So, Arya, this device and the people after you, can you tell me more?" Jack asked, his voice calm, trying to piece together the information. "It is power. My people's legacy," Arya explained, her fingers caressing the device. "It can protect, but also destroy. Very coveted. The Krylocks destroyed my world for it." Jack's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "And they're here now for this?" Arya nodded solemnly. "Yes, they will not stop. They do not care for your people or mine. Only power." "Well, they haven't met us yet," Jack said with a determined grin, his mind racing with plans. "We'll figure out a way to keep you and this thing safe. You've got my word." As the city lights faded into the rearview mirror, Jack felt the weight of the task ahead. It wasn't just about sheltering an alien refugee anymore. It was about standing against a threat that loomed over his entire planet. And in this unexpected encounter, Jack found a new purpose, as unlikely and as daunting as it seemed. The next morning, Jack and Arya found themselves in Jack's makeshift workshop, a cluttered space filled with half-finished projects, tools, and old parts salvaged from various jobs. The smell of engine oil and faint traces of burnt wires lingered in the air. Jack cleared a space on the workbench, setting down coffee for himself and a cup of herbal tea he'd found in the back of his cupboard for Arya. She observed everything with a mix of fascination and caution, the alien device still clutched tightly in her hands. "So, this thing," Jack started, pointing at the artifact, What exactly does it do? You said it's powerful, but I need specifics if we're going to keep it out of the wrong hands. Arya hesitated, her eyes reflecting a hint of sadness as she carefully placed the artifact on the workbench. It is called the Nahara Core. My people, the Viral, created it long ago to harness cosmic energy. It can manipulate fields of reality, time, space, energy, all tied to its wielder's intent. Jack leaned in closer, intrigued. You're telling me it's basically a key to control whatever it touches? Arya nodded, her fingers tracing the device's intricate patterns, symbols that seemed to shift under the light. Yes, but it is more complex. It must be attuned correctly, or it risks unraveling everything it touches. The Krylox see only its destructive potential. They cannot wield it properly, but they do not care. They simply want its power. Jack frowned, running a hand through his messy hair. So, why is it here? Why Earth? Arya glanced at him, her eyes heavy with unspoken burdens. I had to take it far from my home when the Krylox attacked. They annihilated everything in their path. I was the only one who could escape with the core. Jack exhaled slowly, the gravity of Arya's story sinking in. We've got to figure out how to keep them from getting it. I have some friends who might help us, but first, let's see what we can learn from this thing. He set to work, pulling out a few tools and carefully examining the core. It pulsed faintly, as if responding to Arya's proximity, but its functions were unlike anything Jack had ever seen. He glanced up at Arya, who watched him with both hope and trepidation. What's this part here? Jack asked, pointing to a small, recessed panel. Arya leaned in, her hair brushing against his shoulder as she studied the area. It is a failsafe. It activates defenses if someone tries to open the core without the correct sequence. It's why the Krylox have not taken it by force yet. They cannot access its full potential. Jack nodded thoughtfully. So, we need to find a way to activate this thing without setting it off. And we need to do it fast before your friends from outer space catch up to us. Arya looked away, her expression tightening. They will come soon. The core emits a signal, a signature that my enemies can trace. They will not stop until they find it. Jack paused, setting down his tools. Then we make sure they never get the chance. Hours passed as Jack and Arya worked together, deciphering the core's mechanisms. Arya explained the complex energy circuits, and Jack used his engineering skills to bypass some of the more dangerous functions, trying to create a safe environment to explore its capabilities. As they delved deeper, the core responded with occasional flickers of light, resonating faintly with Arya's touch. Can it be used to fight back? Jack asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Arya hesitated. Yes, but it requires great control. It amplifies intent, good or bad. If wielded recklessly, it could tear a rift through everything it touches. The Krylox do not care about the consequences. They see only conquest. Jack's mind churned with possibilities. We can't let it fall into their hands. If we can find a way to shield the signal or turn it against them, we might stand a chance. Arya looked at Jack, her expression softening. You risk much for someone you have just met. Jack smirked, shrugging. I've always had a knack for helping the wrong people at the wrong time. And besides, this is bigger than just you and me. If the Krylox get this thing, we're all in trouble. Arya offered a rare smile, grateful for Jack's unwavering resolve. Thank you, Jack, for believing when no one else would. Jack nodded, returning her smile. We're in this together now. Let's make sure they regret underestimating us. As the day wore on, Jack and Arya continued their work, united by a shared determination. The core's secrets were slowly unfolding, but with every discovery came the looming shadow of the Krylox. Time was running out, but Jack was more determined than ever. The battle ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, they had a plan, and it was a start. The sun had barely risen when Jack and Arya's world was turned upside down. News of strange sightings and the discovery of unidentified technology was plastered all over the morning broadcasts. It seemed that someone had leaked information about Arya's crash site, and now every government agency, bounty hunter, and conspiracy theorist was on the hunt. Jack's workshop, once a safe haven, had become a ticking time bomb. The sound of sirens in the distance and the faint buzz of drones overhead set Jack on edge. He glanced at Arya, who sat by the workbench, her expression one of controlled fear. "We need to move," Jack said, his voice tense. He pulled a duffel bag from under the table, stuffing it with essential tools, his laptop, and the core wrapped carefully in a thick cloth. "They're onto us, and it's only a matter of time before they find this place." Arya nodded, rising quickly. "Where will we go?" Jack looked around, calculating their options. "I've got a few contacts who can help us lay low, but we can't stay in one place for long. We'll need to keep moving." Just as Jack finished speaking, the distant whir of a surveillance drone became louder, circling closer to the workshop. Jack cursed under his breath, grabbing Arya's arm. "Come on, through the back." They sprinted through the narrow alley behind the workshop. Jack's truck parked hastily at the far end. Jack threw the bag into the back seat and motioned Arya inside. As they sped off, Jack checked his rearview mirror, catching glimpses of drones tailing them. Who would have leaked this? Jack asked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Arya looked out the window, her face unreadable. The Krylocks have agents everywhere. They pay humans to do their work. Those who are greedy, those who do not question. Jack sighed. Figures. Money talks, no matter which planet you're on. They drove in silence, navigating through side streets and industrial areas to avoid the main roads. Jack's phone buzzed with alerts, news reports about mysterious signals and sightings. The government was labeling it all as a potential threat, urging citizens to report any unusual activity. Jack knew it was only a matter of time before they'd be cornered. "Jack, we cannot keep running forever," Arya said quietly, her eyes scanning the passing landscape. "We just need to get off their radar for a bit," Jack replied. "There's a guy I know, David. He used to work with me in aerospace, knows how to keep things off the grid. If anyone can help us hide, it's him." Jack pulled up to a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The building looked abandoned, windows darkened and covered in grime, but Jack knew better. He parked the truck and led Arya to a side door, knocking in a peculiar rhythm. Moments later, the door swung open to reveal a burly man with a scruffy beard and sharp eyes. "Jack Saunders," David said, crossing his arms. "Didn't think I'd see you dragging trouble to my doorstep." Jack smirked, gesturing to Arya. "We're in a bit of a bind. Need somewhere off the books. Just for a while." David glanced at Arya, his gaze lingering on her unusual appearance, but he didn't ask questions. Instead, he nodded and stepped aside. "Come in. I'll get the power running." Inside, the warehouse was a haven of old tech and forgotten projects. David flicked on a few lights, illuminating the cavernous space filled with machinery and makeshift workstations. "You're lucky I owe you," David muttered, pulling up a chair. "Now, what's all this about?" Jack explained the situation as best he could, detailing Arya's origins and the threat of the Krylocks. David listened without interrupting, occasionally glancing at Arya, who sat quietly, observing everything. "So, let me get this straight," David said finally. "You're telling me she's from another planet, and some alien warlords are coming here for that." He pointed at the core, which glowed faintly from inside Jack's bag. "That's the gist of it," Jack confirmed. "We need time to figure out how to stop them." David sighed, scratching his head. "I've heard crazier things, but not many. Look, I can help you lie low for a bit, but those drones, they'll keep looking. You need to scramble the signal, make them think you're someplace you're not." Jack nodded. "Can you do it?" David grinned, already pulling cables and devices from a cluttered shelf. "I've got just the thing, but it's not foolproof. We'll set up a decoy and redirect their attention for now. It'll buy you time, but you're going to need a long-term plan." As David set up the equipment, Arya approached Jack, her voice low. "Thank you, Jack. You do not have to risk so much." Jack glanced at her, shaking his head. "We're in this together, remember? Besides, I've never been one to back down from a challenge." David's makeshift scrambler fired up, sending out false signals to mislead the Krylox's trackers. The drone circling above suddenly veered off, chasing phantom readings into the distance. "We've got a window," David said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "But it won't last. You've got to find a way to end this, or they'll just keep coming." Jack nodded, determination etched on his face. "We will, one way or another." As night fell, Jack and Arya prepared to move again, the core securely hidden. The chase had only just begun, and the odds were stacked against them. But with every step, Jack felt more certain that they would find a way to turn the tables. The Krylox might have the numbers, but Jack and Arya had something far more valuable: the will to fight back. The sound of footsteps echoed through the grand corridors of the International Security Summit, held in a heavily guarded convention center in Washington, D.C. Representatives from world governments, military leaders, and scientific minds had gathered to discuss escalating global threats, oblivious to the real danger lurking above them in the skies. Jack and Arya moved quickly through the maze of hallways, blending in with the swarm of people rushing to their seats. Jack had called in a favor from an old military contact to get them access, knowing it was their best shot at warning the world about the Krylox threat. Arya wore a long coat with a hood pulled low to hide her alien features, but her eyes darted nervously from side to side, aware that any misstep could expose them both. "Just stick close and let me do the talking," Jack whispered, guiding Arya through a side entrance and into a vast auditorium buzzing with anxious energy. On the stage, a series of monitors displayed various global conflicts and potential extraterrestrial threats, though none of them even hinted at the Krylox fleet bearing down on Earth. "We shouldn't be here," Arya muttered, her voice tight with anxiety. "They will not believe us." Jack glanced at her, his expression firm. "We don't have a choice. We need them to understand what's coming." They slipped into seats near the back, staying low as the session began. High-ranking officials took turns at the podium, delivering speeches about security measures and technological advancements, but it was all surface-level talk, designed to reassure rather than confront the looming reality. Jack's patience wore thin as he listened to hollow promises of defense and deterrence. They were completely unprepared. Finally, when the floor opened for questions, Jack seized the opportunity. He stood, pulling Arya with him, and marched toward the stage, ignoring the surprised murmurs that rippled through the crowd. "Excuse me, I need a moment," Jack called out, his voice cutting through the buzz. He stepped onto the stage, standing defiantly in front of the microphone. Security personnel moved in, but Jack raised a hand, holding them at bay. "My name is Jack Saunders, and I'm here to tell you all that the threats you're discussing are nothing compared to what's actually coming." He gestured to Arya, who hesitated before pulling back her hood, revealing her alien features to the stunned assembly. Gasps and shouts erupted, and the crowd shifted uneasily. "This is Arya," Jack continued. "She's not from this planet. Her world was destroyed by an alien force called the Krylox, and now they're coming here. They're tracking an artifact that she brought to Earth, a device that can control incredible power. If we don't stop them, they'll do to us what they did to her people." The room descended into chaos. Some laughed, dismissing it as an elaborate hoax. Others grabbed their phones, recording the scene or frantically making calls. A few security agents moved forward, trying to pull Jack and Arya off the stage. A man in a sharp suit, clearly one of the lead officials, stepped up to the microphone, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Mr. Saunders, this is a serious forum for credible security discussions. We don't have time for science fiction stories or whatever stunt this is." Jack clenched his fists, frustration boiling over. "This isn't a joke. Arya's people are dead because no one believed them, either. And now they're coming for us." Arya stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. I know you do not trust me. I am not from your world. But the Krylocks are real, and they will show no mercy. We have little time. This core," she held up the device, "is all that stands between you and them. It can help us fight back, but we need your help." The official raised an eyebrow, sneering. "And what do you expect us to do? Hand over control to some alien and her pet human? We protect Earth, not play games with myths." A sudden, deep rumble shook the building, cutting off the official mid-sentence. The lights flickered, and the ground trembled as a booming sound echoed from above. Panic swept through the room as the monitors flickered to show the impossible. An enormous Krylocks warship descending into the atmosphere, its dark, menacing silhouette blotting out the sky. Screams erupted, and the assembly turned to chaos. Security scrambled, trying to evacuate the delegates, while the officials on stage stood frozen, their disbelief shattered by the sight of the looming threat. Jack grabbed Arya's hand, pulling her away from the stage as debris started to rain down from the ceilings. "We have to get to higher ground," Jack yelled over the chaos, guiding Arya through the panicking crowd. "They'll land their troops any second." Arya looked back at the screen, fear tightening her features. "They are here faster than I thought. They know we are close." Jack pushed through a side exit, dragging Arya into a stairwell. "We need to regroup. There's no way they can deny this now. We'll figure out how to use the core against them, but first, we need to survive." Arya nodded, clutching the core tightly. "We must get away from the city. They will target dense populations first." As they burst onto the rooftop, the view was horrifying. A dark fleet hovering above the skyline, smaller ships breaking off and descending like predators on the hunt. Sirens wailed in the distance, and military jets scrambled to intercept, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Jack and Arya looked at each other, understanding that they were now the only ones who knew enough to fight back. "There's no turning back now," Jack said, his voice grim but determined. "We've got their attention. Now we need to show them we're not just prey." Arya met his gaze, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "They think they can crush you like they did my people. But you are not them. You can still fight." Jack nodded, gripping the railing as the first blast shook the city below. Together, they descended back into the chaos, ready to take on the battle that no one else was prepared for. The assembly's disbelief had cost them precious time. But now, Jack and Arya would make every second count. Jack's truck barreled down the highway, weaving through the panicked traffic as explosions echoed in the distance. The Krylocks warships hovered menacingly over the city, firing precision strikes that sent shock waves through the streets. People fled in all directions, desperate to escape the unfolding chaos. Jack glanced at Arya, who sat in the passenger seat, clutching the core as if it were the only thing keeping her anchored. "We need to get as far from the city as possible," Jack said, his voice strained. "They're targeting anything that moves." Arya's eyes never left the warships in the rear-view mirror, her expression a mix of fear and focus. "The core signal is growing stronger. They can trace it even through your technology. They will follow us no matter where we go." Jack tightened his grip on the wheel. "Then we need to use the core to throw them off. Can it create some kind of false trail or something?" Arya hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, but it will require precise manipulation. The core can alter the flow of time and space, create echoes of our presence in multiple places at once. But it's dangerous. If we miscalculate, we could get trapped in one of the time fractures." Jack glanced at her, determination etched on his face. "It's better than being a sitting duck. We have to try." They pulled off the main road, driving into a secluded forest area far from the chaos of the city. Jack parked the truck under a canopy of trees, shielding it from aerial surveillance. Arya climbed out, setting the core on the ground between them. Its surface glowed faintly, the symbols shifting like flowing water. "Okay," Jack said, crouching beside her. "How do we make this thing work?" Arya placed her hands on the core, closing her eyes as she focused. "We need to visualize the places we want to project ourselves, places the Krylocks would expect us to go. It will create temporal distortions, false versions of us in different locations. It's a trick, but it might buy us time. Jack nodded. Let's give them a wild goose chase. The core hummed louder as Arya concentrated, her face contorted in intense focus. Slowly, the air around them began to ripple, like heat waves distorting reality. Jack watched in awe as faint, ghostly images of himself and Arya began to form in various directions, flickering in and out of existence. The projections were translucent, but they moved convincingly, mimicking their every action. "This is insane," Jack whispered, his heart pounding. "It's like we're everywhere and nowhere." Arya opened her eyes, beads of sweat on her forehead. "We have to keep moving. The projections will hold them off, but they will not last long." Jack helped Arya to her feet, and they sprinted back to the truck, watching as the Krylok's drones, now confused by the multiple signals, split off in different directions, chasing the false images. As they drove further into the wilderness, Jack could see the Krylok's forces scattering, their precision faltering as they pursued the phantom versions of him and Arya. The sky above rippled with bursts of light as the Krylok's warships tried to target the projections, their weapons firing into empty spaces. "This is working," Jack said, barely able to believe it. "They're wasting firepower on nothing." Arya nodded, but her face remained tense. "It won't last forever. The core can only maintain the distortions for a short time. We need to find a place to regroup, somewhere they can't track us." Jack thought for a moment, his mind racing through the possibilities. Then an idea struck him. There's an old bunker upstate. Used to be a Cold War relic, totally off-grid. If we can get there, we'll have a moment to catch our breath and figure out our next move. Arya nodded, clutching the core as Jack floored the accelerator, pushing the truck to its limits. The road twisted and turned as they climbed higher into the mountains, the dense forest offering a much-needed cover. The further they went, the less the sounds of battle echoed in their ears. As they neared the bunker's entrance, hidden behind a thick curtain of overgrown vegetation, Jack pulled the truck to a stop. He jumped out, pushing aside the foliage to reveal a rusted metal door. It was heavy, but with Arya's help, they managed to pry it open, the old hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the bunker was dark and musty, a relic of another era. Old maps and faded posters lined the walls, and dust-covered equipment lay scattered across metal tables. Jack quickly scanned the room, checking for any signs of recent use, but everything was as it had been left decades ago. "This place is perfect," Jack said, securing the door behind them. "No signals in or out. They won't be able to find us here." Arya placed the core on a table, its glow now dim and erratic. "The projections are starting to collapse. The Krylok's will realize soon that they've been deceived." Jack nodded, setting up a makeshift station with his laptop and a few salvage devices. "We need to analyze the core's capabilities. If we can figure out how to weaponize it, or at least disrupt their technology, we might have a fighting chance." Arya joined him, her eyes scanning the screens as Jack fed the core's data through his improvised setup. "It was never meant for war," Arya said quietly, "but we have no choice now." Jack glanced at her, sensing the weight of her words. "We'll make it work. We have to. We can't let them take this planet." As the hours passed, they worked tirelessly, poring over every detail the core revealed. They discovered that the core's energy could, in theory, be used to disrupt the Krylok's advanced systems, but it would require precise application and immense focus from Arya. "They won't expect us to fight back with this," Jack said, a plan forming in his mind. "We just need to get close enough." Arya looked at him, determination flickering in her eyes. "Then we make them pay for underestimating us." Jack smiled despite the tension. "Damn right. Let's show these bastards what happens when you mess with the wrong planet." With the core secrets slowly unraveling and the Krylok's momentarily disoriented, Jack and Arya knew they were far from safe. But for the first time, they had a sliver of a plan, an unpredictable, dangerous, and desperate plan. but a plan nonetheless. And for now, that was enough. The bunker's walls trembled as the sounds of distant explosions grew louder. Jack and Arya sat huddled around the core, their faces illuminated by its eerie glow. The core's energy fluctuated wildly, reflecting the urgency of their situation. Jack adjusted his makeshift setup, rerouting power and data to better understand the device's potential. "They're closing in," Arya said. Her voice strained as she monitored a small screen showing distorted images of Krylok's forces regrouping. The temporary reprieve from their projections had ended. The Kryloks had recalibrated and were once again tracking the core's energy signature. "We've run out of time," Jack muttered, his eyes fixed on the core. "We need to strike now, or this is it." Arya's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the core. "I can channel its energy, but it will take everything I have to control it. If we get this wrong..." Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We don't have a choice. It's us or them. Just focus on what you know, on what you've seen them do." Arya nodded, steeling herself. "I can disrupt their command structure. If we target the mothership's core systems, it could send a feedback loop through their entire fleet. They won't see it coming." Jack grabbed his gear, including a portable signal jammer they had rigged from the bunker's old tech. "Then let's give them one hell of a surprise." They emerged from the bunker into the twilight, the sky painted in hues of red and orange, punctuated by the dark silhouettes of Krylok's warships. Jack's truck roared to life as they sped toward the nearest Krylok's landing zone. The road was rough, littered with debris and wreckage from earlier skirmishes. But Jack maneuvered with a determined focus, his mind solely on the mission ahead. As they approached the outskirts of the city, the Krylok's forces became more visible, tall, imposing figures with metallic armor and glowing red eyes. They moved with precision, coordinating their efforts to secure key locations. Jack parked the truck behind a pile of rubble, and they stealthily moved closer on foot, staying low to avoid detection. Arya pointed to the massive mothership hovering overhead, its sheer size casting a shadow over the entire area. "That's our target. The central core is located at the heart of the ship. If we can get close enough, I can use the core to overload their systems." Jack nodded, checking his makeshift signal jammer. "I'll cover you and buy as much time as I can. Just make sure you're ready." They navigated through the ruins, inching closer to the mothership's landing struts. Krylok sentries patrolled the perimeter, their movements mechanical and methodical. Jack took aim with a compact plasma rifle he'd scavenged from an abandoned weapons cache, taking out a sentry with a precise shot to its head. Arya moved swiftly, her eyes locked on the towering structure above. As they neared the entrance to the ship, Arya stopped, clutching the core tightly. "This is it. Once we start, they'll know we're here." Jack set the jammer on a nearby platform, its interference signal buzzing faintly. "Let them come. We'll make it count." Arya stepped forward, raising the core, her focus sharpening. The air around them began to crackle with energy as the core activated, sending waves of distortion rippling outward. The mothership's metallic surface flickered, reacting to the sudden surge of alien power. "Hold it steady," Jack urged, scanning the area as more Krylok's forces converged on their position. He fired off shots, taking down approaching enemies, but more kept coming. They moved like a relentless tide, undeterred by Jack's efforts. Arya's face contorted with concentration, her grip on the core tightening. "Almost there. I just need a few more seconds." Suddenly, a blast from above rocked the ground, sending Jack and Arya sprawling. The Krylok's warlord had descended from the ship, towering over his troops with an air of supremacy. His armor was black and crimson, adorned with symbols of conquest, and his eyes glowed a menacing red as he stared down at them. "Foolish humans," the warlord's voice boomed, resonating like a guttural growl. "You think you can challenge us with the relic of a dead world." Jack scrambled to his feet, firing at the warlord, but his shots were deflected by an invisible shield. The warlord extended his arm, sending a wave of psychic force that knocked Jack backward, slamming him into a pile of debris. Arya struggled to maintain control of the core, the energy surging chaotically as the warlord's presence disrupted her focus. The core's light flickered wildly, and Arya's strength began to wane. The warlord advanced, his eyes locked on Arya. Your kind failed to protect it. Now it belongs to us. Jack, bruised but not beaten, forced himself up, gritting his teeth against the pain. You're not taking anything, he growled, lunging at the warlord with a desperate burst of fury. They grappled, Jack's fists landing blows against the alien's armor. But the warlord's strength was overwhelming. He lifted Jack effortlessly, tossing him aside like a rag doll. Arya's vision blurred as she fought to regain control, the core's energy slipping from her grasp. I won't let you win, she whispered, pushing past her fear. She focused all her remaining willpower on the core, channeling the last of her strength into one final, desperate move. A blinding pulse of light erupted from the core, enveloping the warlord and his surrounding forces. The ground shook violently as the feedback loop Arya had predicted surged through the Krylock systems. The warlord roared in agony as his armor malfunctioned, sparks flying from his body as his shield shattered. Jack seized the moment, lunging forward with renewed vigor. He grabbed a fallen Krylock's weapon and fired, the blast tearing through the warlord's exposed chest. The towering alien staggered, his expression twisted in rage and disbelief before collapsing in a heap of shattered metal. Arya collapsed to her knees, the core's light fading to a faint glow. Jack rushed to her side, helping her up as the remaining Krylock's forces faltered, their coordination disrupted by the overload. The mothership above them flickered erratically, losing altitude as its systems failed. You did it, Jack said, his voice hoarse but triumphant. You actually did it. Arya looked up at the crippled warship, tears welling in her eyes. We've only bought ourselves time. They will regroup. Jack nodded, his gaze hardening as he looked at the battlefield. Then we make every second count. We're not done yet. As the mothership drifted off course, crashing into the distant hills, Jack and Arya knew they had struck a critical blow. But the battle was far from over. The Krylocks were wounded but not defeated. They would come back stronger, and next time they would not be so easily deceived. For now, though, Jack and Arya had won a battle no one believed could be fought. The war was still ahead, but they were ready. They had to be. Smoke filled the air as Jack and Arya stood on the hilltop, overlooking the battered landscape below. The remnants of the Krylock's mothership lay scattered across the hills, its once mighty structure now a burning wreck. The sky was still filled with the looming shapes of smaller Krylock's vessels, regrouping for a counterattack. Jack adjusted his grip on his weapon, every muscle in his body tense for the inevitable confrontation. We've got to move before they reorganize, Jack said, scanning the area for any signs of human forces. The Krylocks weren't just retreating. They were recalibrating, and Jack knew it was only a matter of time before they launched their next offensive. Arya, visibly drained from her exertion with the core, nodded weakly. We need to disable their fleet completely. If we don't, they will adapt and come back stronger. Jack glanced at Arya, seeing the exhaustion etched on her face. You've done more than enough. Let's find some cover and come up with a plan. But before they could move, the ground beneath them rumbled. From the downed mothership, a squadron of Krylock's troopers emerged, their movements synchronized and precise. Leading them was a massive, heavily armored commander, his eyes glowing a furious red. Unlike the warlord, this one carried a massive energy weapon that crackled with dangerous power. He pointed it directly at Jack and Arya, his intentions clear. They're not giving up, Jack muttered, raising his rifle. We're going to have to finish this here and now. The commander barked orders in a guttural alien tongue, and the troopers spread out, surrounding Jack and Arya. Blasts of plasma whizzed past, exploding into the rocks around them. Jack fired back, each shot carefully aimed, but the Krylocks' advanced shields absorbed most of the damage. Arya staggered, gripping the core tightly as she tried to summon the last dregs of its power. I can disrupt their shields, but I can't hold it for long. Jack squeezed off a few more shots, ducking behind a boulder as plasma scorched the air. Do what you can. I'll keep them busy. Arya focused, the core flickering to life in her hands. She closed her eyes, channeling what little energy she had left, and the core responded, sending out a rippling pulse. The troopers' shields flickered and died, leaving them momentarily vulnerable. Now! Arya gasped, collapsing to one knee. Jack didn't hesitate. He sprang from cover, his rifle blazing as he tore through the unprotected troopers. The Krylok's commander roared in defiance, his weapon discharging wildly as he tried to fight back, but Jack's relentless assault overwhelmed him. The commander fell, his armor smoking, and the remaining troopers hesitated, their coordination shattered. But victory was short-lived. Overhead, the remaining Krylok's vessels began to reposition, their weapons glowing ominously. They were preparing for a full-scale bombardment, one that would level everything in their path, including Jack and Arya. Jack's mind raced. We need to take out their flagship, the one coordinating all of this. If we can disable it, the rest of their fleet will fall apart. Arya struggled to her feet, the core flickering weakly. We have one chance. I can overload the core, direct its energy into the flagship, but once I start, there's no stopping it. Jack stared at her, understanding the risks. Are you sure you can control it? Arya's eyes met his, filled with determination. It's our only hope. If I fail, it will destroy everything within range, including us. Jack nodded, his resolve hardening. Then let's make sure you don't fail. They sprinted toward a nearby ridge, giving them a clear view of the flagship hovering above the battlefield. The core's light grew brighter as Arya began the process of overloading its energy. The ground around them shook as the flagship's cannons locked on, preparing to fire. Jack set up a makeshift barricade, using debris to shield Arya as she worked. Just keep going. I've got your back. Arya's concentration was absolute, her entire being focused on the core. Waves of energy poured out, crackling through the air like a thunderstorm. Jack fired at the approaching Krylok's forces, holding them at bay as Arya directed the core's power upward, channeling it into a single, searing beam aimed directly at the flagship. The beam struck the vessel's main reactor, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. The flagship shuddered violently, its systems short-circuiting under the immense strain. Explosions rippled across its hull, and the ship began to break apart, pieces of burning metal raining down. Arya pushed harder, sweat streaming down her face as she forced the core's energy to its limit. The flagship's engines failed, and with a deafening roar, the massive ship plummeted from the sky, crashing into the valley below in a blinding fireball. Jack shielded his eyes from the blast, feeling the heat even from their distance. The remaining Krylok's vessels faltered, their formation breaking as the flagship's destruction sent shockwaves through their command structure. It's working, Jack shouted, firing off the last of his ammunition to keep the stragglers at bay. Arya's strength was nearly gone, but she held on, directing the core's residual power to disrupt the fleeing ships. One by one, they veered off course, crashing into the hills or spiraling into the ocean beyond. The once dominant fleet was now a scattered, burning wreck. Finally, Arya collapsed, the core's light dimming to a soft, pulsing glow. Jack rushed to her side, helping her up. She was exhausted but alive, and more importantly, they had done it. The Krylok's invasion force was broken. It's over, Jack said, his voice heavy with relief. You did it, Arya. Arya managed a faint smile, her eyes filled with gratitude. We did it. Together. They stood amidst the wreckage, the battle won but at great cost. The sky, once filled with the menace of the Krylok's, was now clear, the sun setting over a battered but victorious Earth. Jack and Arya knew there would be more challenges ahead. The Krylok's would not easily forgive this defeat, but for now, they had defied the odds. As they looked out over the ruined landscape, Jack put a reassuring arm around Arya's shoulders. We're not just surviving anymore. We're fighting back. And no one, no matter how powerful, will ever take this planet without a fight. Arya nodded, finding strength in his words. Together, they had faced the impossible and won. And as long as they stood together, they knew that no enemy, alien or otherwise, could ever truly conquer the spirit of humanity. Smoke still lingered in the air, mingling with the sharp scent of scorched metal and earth as Jack and Arya made their way back down the hill. The remnants of the Krylox fleet lay scattered across the landscape, their once mighty war machines now reduced to smoldering wreckage. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, a quiet reminder of the calm that followed the storm. Jack helped Arya into the truck, her exhaustion evident in the way she moved, every step heavy. The core, now silent and dim, rested in her lap, its energy spent after the desperate final stand. Jack climbed into the driver's seat, taking a moment to catch his breath, his mind still reeling from the intensity of the battle. "Didn't think we'd make it out of that one," Jack said, starting the engine. "But here we are." Arya looked at him, her expression a mix of weariness and quiet triumph. "We did what we had to. The Krylox will remember today. They will not forget this loss." Jack nodded, navigating through the debris-strewn road. "They might be licking their wounds, but they're not gone for good. We've bought ourselves some time, but we need to prepare for whatever comes next." As they drove, the city came into view. The once bustling streets were eerily quiet, with pockets of civilians and emergency responders picking through the aftermath. Military vehicles were stationed at key points, and Jack could see soldiers setting up defenses in anticipation of any future threats. Arya watched the scenes unfold, her gaze distant. "Your people, they're strong. Even in the face of such destruction, they keep going." Jack smirked, keeping his eyes on the road. "That's humanity for you. We've been knocked down plenty of times, but we always get back up. And now, we've got a few new tricks up our sleeves." They parked near a command center hastily set up in the ruins of a downtown square. Military personnel and government officials were in a flurry of activity, coordinating relief efforts and securing what was left of the city. Jack and Arya stepped out, drawing immediate attention. The sight of the alien girl who had defied all odds alongside an unassuming ex-engineer was a story that had already begun to spread, carried by those who had witnessed their defiance against the Krylox. General Harris, a grizzled veteran who had taken command of the defense forces, approached them, flanked by a squad of soldiers. He gave Jack a curt nod, his expression a mix of respect and skepticism. "Saunders, you sure know how to make a mess." Jack shrugged, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "We got it done, didn't we?" Harris turned his gaze to Arya, his expression softening slightly. "You're the alien they're all talking about, the one who took down the Krylox fleet." Arya nodded, her voice quiet but firm. "I am Arya of the Virile, the last of my kind. I did what I had to, but this is not over. The Krylox will come again." Harris glanced at the wreckage surrounding them, his face hardening. "We'll be ready. Thanks to you, we know what we're up against. And we've got something they don't, our resolve." Jack stepped forward. "We can't let up. We need to start working on ways to counter their technology, to turn their own weapons against them. Arya has shown us it's possible." The general nodded thoughtfully. "We'll need all the help we can get. And if you're willing, we could use your expertise, both of yours." Arya looked at Jack, then back at the general. "I will stay. I will help. But we must move quickly. Every day we waste is a day they prepare." As plans were set in motion for new defenses and countermeasures, Jack and Arya found a quiet corner away from the bustling command center. Jack leaned against a crumbling wall, exhaustion finally catching up to him. He watched Arya as she carefully examined the core, now a mere shadow of its former power. "What happens to that thing now?" Jack asked, nodding toward the core. Arya sighed, her fingers tracing its once bright symbols. "It must be safeguarded. Its power is too great to be left unchecked. The Krylox will always seek it, and others might too. I will protect it, but it cannot be used again. Not like this. Jack nodded, understanding the burden she carried. You're stronger than you know, Arya. We wouldn't have made it without you. Arya met his gaze, a small, genuine smile breaking through her exhaustion. And I would not have made it without you, Jack. You believed in me when no one else would. They sat in silence for a moment, the enormity of what they had accomplished sinking in. Against all odds, they had turned the tide of an invasion that could have ended everything. But both knew this was just the beginning of a larger conflict, one that would test them again and again. Do you think they'll ever stop? Jack asked, his voice low. Arya looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to twinkle. No, not until someone makes them, and that someone is us. Jack nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Then we keep fighting. For every planet, every life they've tried to destroy. We make sure they know they can't just take whatever they want. Arya placed the core back into its containment case, securing it with a series of coded locks. Together, she said firmly, we will make them remember. As night fell, Jack and Arya stood side by side, looking out over the city they had fought to protect. The road ahead was uncertain, but they were ready to face whatever came next. Humanity had been tested, and it had endured. With new allies and newfound resolve, they would continue to stand against the darkness, no matter how many times it came knocking. For now, they had won, and as long as they kept believing in each other, they knew that no enemy could ever truly conquer the spirit of those who dared to fight back.